We weren't entirely sure how we got there. My Anomalous research team and I were responding to unrelated reports in the area, when without warning we found ourselves falling through the floor into what, on the surface, looked like some kind of hotel or office hallway. This was especially strange considering that our equipment didn't pick up any anomalous readings before the event. At first, there was no obvious way back out, but we assumed that if we were to stack the team on each other's shoulders to reach the ceiling, we might be able to clip back through in the spot we initially entered from. But before trying to leave, we thought we could make an attempt to study this location. It was clearly anomalous in nature, and it would be advantageous to us and the Foundation as a whole to gather as much information as we could. The network of hallways we were in seemed to go on forever, and the whole place was decorated the same way. Yellow wallpaper, cream carpet, and segmented white ceilings with buzzing fluorescent lamps embedded into them. The hum of so many lights was overwhelming. The problem surely made worse by the complete lack of any other sound. The carpeting meant that our footsteps didn't even make much noise as we explored. Despite being devoid of any life, the space felt distinctly man-made, but in a way that didn't feel specific to any time or place. The effect was eerie, to say the least. All of us on the research team, regardless of age or nationality, expressed an uneasy feeling that we'd been there before. It was like the environmental equivalent of a mannequin with a blank face. It was so bland and featureless that I suppose it could be compared to anything. The place where we'd found ourselves was not entirely unknown to Foundation staff, though the anomaly was so elusive that it hadn't been very thoroughly documented. It was known as the Backrooms, a strange maze of infinite, seemingly man-made environments that resemble surreal, empty versions of locations from our world. The part that we were currently wandering is usually thought of as Level 0. Surviving accounts of the Backrooms all begin at this point, with the only real way out being to go deeper. So deeper we went. Many times we turned a corner only to find a dead end. Without any landmarks, we found it very easy to get lost. Thankfully, researcher David eventually came up with the idea to use stickers to mark places we'd already seen. He had a pack of labels usually used for specimen bags and took the time to write "cleared" on a number of them, which he stuck up onto the wall every time we turned a corner. It was like a trail of breadcrumbs, only more permanent. Now we had a way of telling where we'd already been and where we hadn't. This continued for what felt like it could have been hours, but also could have only been a few minutes. As soon as we'd fallen into this strange place, we all found that our watches stopped working. It was like being in a frozen moment in time. I'm not too proud to admit that the eerie calm, the lack of any sounds or decoration of any kind, anything at all to break up the monotony of our surroundings, started to get to me. In the few places the fluorescence didn't shine, in the shadows cast by walls and concrete pillars, I would think I saw movement. Though it startled me, I rationalized it to myself as the product of pareidolia, a tendency of the human mind to make shapes out of nothing when deprived of new stimuli. I similarly rationalized away the distant sounds I occasionally heard. That is, until I looked over to researcher Janice and saw that she had turned her head as well. Whatever was making the noise off in the distance, she heard it too. I'm struggling now to even remember what sound it was that I heard. It could have been voices, but it was too muffled and distant to be completely sure. I told researcher Janice that if this labyrinth was truly man-made, there could be pipes behind the walls, which would account for the occasional noise. She nodded and agreed with me, but I'm sure now that nobody in the group really bought that explanation. Something, human or otherwise, had built this place. And I think on some level every member of the team was thinking the same thing. I don't want to run into whoever that happens to be. After what might have been miles of walking, taking pictures, and even taking samples of the carpet and wallpaper material, we reached a section of the maze where the lights started to thin out. The shadows grew darker, more frequent. At the end of this long, dark section of hallway, I saw something light up, and I almost started towards it until it moved, and I realized what I was looking at was in fact a pair of glowing eyes with a glowing smile underneath. I quickly backed away. I was starting to get a strong sense we should turn back and return to this area later with better gear and perhaps something to defend ourselves with. My sense would be proven right later, and this wouldn't be the last run-in I would have with the creature that other travelers have called the Smiler. David marked the area as cleared with a sticker, and we turned in the other direction. Despite what we expected, we were able to find a whole new stretch of hallway that we hadn't explored yet. Now, walking down this path, we passed strange architectural anomalies like a perfectly square hole in the wall with a metal ladder leading up to it. "Do you think someone's down here with us?" Researcher Janice asked. "It's hard to say," I told her. "We'll come back and investigate this tunnel later." David marked the spot with a sticker and took a picture for future reference. Further down the hallway, I discovered a gap in the wall. It was about 5 inches wide, not wide enough to walk through, but wide enough that I could look through and get a good look at the section of the maze on the other side. Squinting, I could just make out the shape of one of David's specimen stickers on the wall, but out of the corner of my eye, I thought I saw something else. A hand, maybe, but it moved too quick for me to tell. This felt too clear to be the same as the moving shadows I thought I had seen earlier in our expedition, but I couldn't be sure it was real either. Perhaps if it had made a noise when it moved, I could have been more inclined to think it was real. The silence of this place, excluding the ever-present hum of the lights, made it all feel so unreal. Eventually, we came to another, darker section of the maze, and with nowhere to go, we headed forwards. Unlike the other dark section we found, though, it wasn't quite pitch black. There were still 2 fluorescents on the ceiling, but they were a cooler tone than the rest of the maze. In the dim light, the wallpaper seemed to turn from yellow to gray to an eerie blue. This was definitely a welcome rest for our eyes after miles and miles of bright yellow. We were ill-prepared to make camp, but we had some rations that we could share. Everyone was exhausted by this point, so we decided this was as good a time as any to take a rest. We slept in shifts, snacking on granola bars and taking sips from our standard field researcher water bottles. "The Foundation will send someone to look for us," Researcher David said, framing it as a statement even though I could tell from his tone that he was asking a question. "What happens if we can't find our way back?" "There must be an exit somewhere," I reassured him. "At least you still have plenty of stickers to mark our way." David shook his head and showed me the roll of stickers. I could see that there wouldn't be too many left until he ran out. At some point after I dozed off, we were all woken by an unearthly noise. It sounded like metal scraping together, mixed with the cry of a wild animal. We all jumped to our feet, looking for the source of the noise. Then, out of the darkness, a figure came lurching towards us. It was an impossible shape, almost like a 2-dimensional image that had come to life. Its limbs were long and black. This must have been one of the things I'd seen moving in the shadows earlier. Its head looked like a formless scribble, like a child's drawing of a storm cloud. It lacked eyes or a mouth, though, meaning whatever I had seen in the dark hallway was something else entirely. We ran out of the room, struggling to follow the path David had left with his stickers as the entity chased us. All the while it kept making that terrible, deafening sound, which at times almost sounded like a heavily distorted human voice. Not all of us were able to escape it, unfortunately. Researcher Janice tripped in her panic and fell behind the rest of the group, allowing the entity to catch up to her. I don't entirely understand what happened to her. 1 second she was there, and then she was gone. I later found out that while we were still trapped in the Backrooms, her body was discovered by the Foundation back in what you might call the front rooms, that is, our world. She was found miles away from the point where we'd entered and appeared to have fallen hundreds of feet from thin air. But of course, we didn't know any of that at the time. The team and I were all shocked and horrified that she could suddenly just vanish. But if we were to take any comfort in this loss, it was that once it had taken a victim, the entity loped back into the darkness, and we were finally able to stop running. However, I'm also an optimist by nature, so I can tell you the bright side of the disappearance and later death of researcher Janice. I've got a place in my party for a new researcher to help us on our next excursion. Your best chance of being selected is joining the DrBob Patreon today, where you can become a junior researcher and decide what I investigate next, in addition to enjoying behind-the-scenes material and uncensored videos that only my patrons can see. By now, our priority was to make it out by any means necessary. There were 5 of us left, and we wouldn't survive long with our current supplies. Eventually, we came back to the place where all of us had fallen through the ceiling. David volunteered to stand on my shoulders and try to reach the entrance into the Backrooms anomaly, but it was no use. His hands only found the plaster drop ceiling panels. When those were pushed up, there was nothing behind them. It seemed the entrance into this place was well and truly one way. With the benefit of hindsight, I can tell you how it's possible to phase or no-clip into the Backrooms. I'm sharing this information with the intention of preventing anyone else from making the same mistakes I did. But of course, if you want to enter the Backrooms of your own free will, there's really nothing I can do to stop you. I can only advise that you bring a weapon with you when you go. Points where it's possible to no-clip into the Backrooms are called, within the small community that has sprung up around this anomaly, terminals. These are not literal terminals, but places where reality isn't quite as it should be. This can be walls or patches of floor that seem to be the wrong color, or objects that cast no shadow even when they should. Doors in impossible places are also a common entry point to the Backrooms. These terminals can be unpredictable, however. And while sometimes it's possible to no-clip by accident, it can take several attempts to do so intentionally. Once you have no-clipped, you'll usually find yourself in level 0, as we did. But on rare instances, people have started on level 1, or even level 2. You might now be wondering who exactly created the Backrooms. Is it one of the monstrous entities we've encountered in level 0? That's certainly one possibility, but it's impossible to prove. Some more religiously inclined explorers have interpreted it as the work of a creator god, with many people comparing it to biblical descriptions of limbo or purgatory. Other people have taken it as proof of the theory that our entire reality is a simulation. In this interpretation, the Backrooms are a kind of developer space for the creators of the simulation to test elements before adding them to the program. But how do you get from level 0 to level 1 and beyond? At this point in our journey, the research team and I were about to find out. I can't quite recall when I noticed it, but a subtle change came over the environment at some point in the journey. I felt like my senses had dulled, almost like I was on the verge of falling asleep. I also noticed instead of the plain wallpaper, there was now a manila pattern that looked almost Victorian in style. I was reminded of a short story I'd read a long time ago called The Yellow Wallpaper, but where in that story the wallpaper drives the main character to madness with its unpredictability, this manila pattern was comfortingly regular. This is the appropriately named Manila Room, which is reported by many travelers through the Backrooms and is usually thought of as a place to rest and recover. It's also an exit from level 0 to level 1, as we found when researcher Diane tried to take a sample of the wallpaper. She touched it and went straight through the wall as if nothing was there. Before the rest of our party followed suit, David pulled me aside and gave me a worrying message. We were all out of stickers. Wherever we went from here, if it was as uniform as level 0, there would be no way to mark our path. But as we soon found out, walking in circles was going to be the least of our worries. That, though, is going to have to be a story for another day. If you have any advice for surviving future levels of the Backrooms, let me know down in the comments. My future might just depend on it.